Hello, Mark Allen Patterson here, and I'm here for Convo Room, and we're talking about money. That's why I got on the green jacket today. We're talking salaries, we're talking negotiation, and I cannot wait to dive into it. Let's go! Before we dive in, I need you to hit that like button and also don't forget to subscribe. Be sure to hit that bell notification if you want to be notified anytime we post new content. First things first, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. Well, how do you negotiate? We're going to talk about it. So, this conversation is inspired by some information I found out about Will Smith and Martin Lawrence and their participation in Bad Boys 3 or Bad Boys for Life, whichever way you want to call it, right? So, Martin Lawrence is bringing in $6 million, according to Variety.com, and Will Smith is bringing in a whopping $17 million for the same movie. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was Martin, I have a problem. But, let's just be honest, though. Obviously, Will Smith is, killing it in the game right now. And Martin Lawrence, $6 million is nothing to scoff at all. But I do think it brings up the idea that compensation is something, especially when it comes to negotiation, that we all face. And sometimes when you find out the landscape of your whole work situation and you realize what other people might be making or what others in your industry might be making compared to you, it makes you become a bit more of a savvy negotiator. So the first point is that everything is negotiable. Repeat this after me, please. Everything is negotiable. Even if they say it's non-negotiable, trust me, something is negotiable. At one point, I was in a job and my superior departed from the position. My boss at the time sat me down and we talked about next steps, and he assured me how confident he was in me to fulfill the role and what we would do next and all this kind of stuff. Great conversation, right? And then, of course, you hear is there anything that I can do, right? So my response at the time was, I would like my salary or my compensation to be commensurate with the roles and responsibility. And I would definitely advise that, but I would advise you, now that hindsight is 2020, to make sure that you have a number in mind, because either you're going to leave it up to chance and everything happens great and it's fine and dandy, or you're going to be faced with a situation where you're going to be presented with a number, and the number that you had in mind or the number that works for you to do the work does not match the number that they're trying to present. So you're stuck with the dilemma at this point. Either everything goes well and you accept the offer that they present because you've left it up to chance, or you present them with the number of what you're expecting and they have the opportunity to kind of, go back and forth. We're not talking tug of war here, but go back and forth to arrive at a number that's mutually beneficial, right? So just to recap that point, everything is negotiable. I cannot stress it enough. Everything is negotiable. Which leads me to my next point. Why is it negotiable? Because you have to know your end game, right? Your end game is so important because think about it this way. If you don't know what your long term is, you'll pretty much settle for anything. And same for the company. You have to do your research. We'll talk about doing your research a little bit later, even on this topic, because this is like so weighty when it comes to doing your homework before you sit down for a negotiation. But if you've done your homework and you just sit down to know exactly what's important to you, and you know where you want to be in 5 years, where you want to be in 10 years, and how that aligns with this company, then what you're asking for is not just more for the sake of asking for more. You're asking for the conditions to be right for you to do this work and be there in the long term. Now, I do hear you thinking, some of you out there might be like, well, I'm not trying to be in this job for the long term. Look, no judgment here. There are times when you might take a position and that position is money to take care of a need, and you're in that particular position for a specific amount of time. And we all get it. We all understand it. But for those that are trying to land that position that's going to set them up for their next 5 years, their next 10 years, it's super important to know your end game. So you got to know what's important to you. What type of lifestyle are you trying to live? You know, how much money do you need to come in? What are your expenses going out? You got to know all of those details, and then your goals within the company and in the career, because you got to know, like, are you facing a ceiling? There are just certain ceilings that you're gonna face, and yes, I mean, women are shattering glass ceilings, and people, no matter what your limitations are, we're breaking barriers left and right. I get it. But there are some times when you are faced in a situation when you have to recognize that there is a lifespan that you might have at a company, or there is a wall that you will inevitably reach. I mean, let's just think of it this way. Sometimes in family-owned companies, like, there's only so far you can actually go without being in the family, right? Or if there are positions where it requires you to take on a particular skill set that you might not be interested in to excel within the company. It might mean that, yeah, you can stay in the same industry, but you're going to change roles, change lanes. No biggie, no harm done, right? So the thing is, you got to know your end game, which leads me to my next point. You got to know where your why line is. And the why stands for yes. You got to know what you're willing to say yes to. If you know your end game, you know what you're willing to say yes to, and importantly, what you're willing to say no to, and how you're willing to walk away from the deal if it doesn't fit. So we got to talk about the how and the when of negotiating your salary, right? So I think the best time to even approach the money conversation, if you already work for a company, we'll start there, and then we'll talk about if you're waiting for an offer or if you have an offer and you're trying to begin the negotiation process. So if you're in a company already, I think the perfect time to do it is during an evaluation. If you already have your boss singing your praises about how you just killed it on this latest project, or how you're bringing in more revenue for the company, whether it be sales or whatever the case might be, the main gist of it is you got to make sure you have the conversation when all is well, right? So the scene is set. You're talking through an evaluation, and yes, you've been doing well. I think the disclaimer obviously is, if you're not performing well, do not talk about money. Just don't do it. They might want to reduce your salary for that matter. But when you think about it, you're talking in the moment of an evaluation, and then you might just slip it in there. Is this a good time to talk about salary, or is this a good time for us to discuss my compensation? I have a couple questions. And then, boom, you're going to go right in, be direct, be specific, and move forward. For those of you that are waiting on an offer, or you receive an offer, and then it's like time to kind of do the dance a little bit, I would recommend, don't go into the first interview trying to hammer down dollars and cents. The first interview should really nail down fit. I'm a big proponent of making sure that you feel out the fit of an organization first. So that first interview should be like a first date. You talk about, what are you looking for? What type of person are you? What's your temperament? A key thing that I typically ask when I'm in an interview is, what am I going to love the most about working here? And what am I going to love the least about working here? And I feel like the more candor you can get to within, especially when talking with a recruiter, but even if you're talking to the hiring manager or someone that's in the department, I feel like those conversations go so well, because you can actually get a feel for a day in the life. So that way, when it's time for conversation or the follow-up interview number 2, you already know that they're interested in you, that they're sold on the idea of you being a part of the organization. So you can just have the conversation to say, okay, well, let's talk money, let's talk details, right? So if you're talking money, you're talking details, the thing that you got to nail down is, what is your number, right? That leads me to my next point. You got to know your numbers. Knowing your numbers is all about 4 key areas, and I want you to really pay attention to this, all right? So your numbers, starting off, you got to know your results, right? your results. After you know your results, I want you to pay attention to the market. What is the market willing to pay for you or someone who has your qualifications and your experience in this position? After you know that, then you got to know your ceiling and you got to know your floor. Let's jump right into all these. These are really simple, but I need you to pay attention to all of them, right? Here we go. So your numbers have to tell the narrative, right? And by numbers, I'm talking right now about your results. So you got to remember, if somebody's sitting across from you, you're not just talking about how great you are. You got to talk about the context of why your narrative makes so much sense for the company right now and moving forward to where the company's going in terms of objectives, in terms of long-term vision, and you're just making the case, right? So if you're making the case, you got to talk about the fact that, yeah, like I was able to do these types of numbers already, and this is what it equates to in terms of impact for the people within our organization and the people that we serve, right? And if you can make that case and if you can tell that story, it goes a long way. I would say even further than you just going down the list of, oh, I was able to procure X amount of this and I was able to raise Y amount of that. Like, who cares? You know, like everybody has a story. Everybody has numbers. Everybody has stats. But what I would say few people seem to be able to do well is tell a story with the narrative. And if you can connect your numbers with the narrative, man, you're killing it. All right. So after we talk through the idea of your results, you got to know what the market is willing to pay. So I would say do your homework. So obviously you got to take some online research with a grain of salt because people just be inflating numbers left and right and you can't tell what's true and what's not these days. So I would use online research in terms of like Glassdoor, social media forums, Facebook groups, all that kind of stuff. I would gather as much intel as I can and I would get me a range, right? And that range should be, I would say, between $10,000 of a difference, or depending on how high the income bracket is, you might be able to, make that probably 10 to 20, but we're talking, I would say 10 grand, keep it as narrow and specific as possible. Then I would talk to a recruiter. And within your recruiting conversation, I would get some real details. And I'm not just talking about a recruiter that you just picked up and found on Google that's just like a random person. You need to find somebody local to your area because it's very obvious that, a position in Atlanta where I live right now is not going to pay as much as one in New York where the cost of living is way more, or, God forbid, God bless y'all out in California. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things that you need to make sure that the numbers that you're looking at are based on your industry, positions that are similar, and what the market is bearing right now for your area. And if you don't know of any recruiters, I think just an easy way to probably get some free advice is just to maybe start talking to, depending again on the industry that you're trying to get into, you might be able to talk to some people, some temp agencies, or some people who might already be in that position, because sometimes in creative fields, I would say too, like it's easy to kind of find like, okay, well, how much did this person get paid? How much did that person get paid? Because like just word travels fast, and even if numbers are inflated, you get a general sense of how much someone like you can get paid for the position you're looking for. So beyond that, we talked already about your results, and we talked about exactly what the market is willing to pay for your position. Now you got to know your ceiling and your floor. This is really more of you just kind of doing the homework within yourself. It's a personal inventory. You got to know, okay, this is what I'm like, I cannot go below. Because obviously, like, okay, well, if I'm doing this work and I only got X amount of hours to work with and I can't really freelance outside of this position, well, it's got to pay me X amount so that way I can cover all of my expenses if this is going to suck up all my time. Well, if you realize like, oh, I can supplement, and I would be very careful about underestimating the time needed to fulfill a position, because sometimes you might think, oh, well, even though it's full time or even though it's part time, I can use these extra hours to, gain employment or gain extra income elsewhere with the side hustle. But sometimes the emotional output for some jobs is so heavy, especially on the front end, or they go through seasons where, I mean, it's just all hands on deck, everyone's invested, that you really do not have the capacity to take on anything outside of your job if you really want to maintain any level of a balance with, your family and just life outside, and just to actually enjoy the life that you have with the income that you're earning. So I would be very, very, very intentional about knowing where your ceiling and your floor is. Your floor is, look, this is the bare minimum. This is the starting point, the ground that I can stand on in terms of what I can accept for this position. Your ceiling, on the other hand, is like, okay, this is my number that I'm willing, and I wanted to even say willing, this is the number that I'm aiming for in conversation. That's my starting negotiation number, right? And so you're starting from a place where, and listen to me carefully, you're not using people and you're not like just inflating numbers, but I would venture to say that you have to start as high as possible, because guess what? They're going to try to bring your number down as low as possible. So you already know what the market is saying. So you're going to go on the high end of what the market is saying that you'd actually be able to earn, right? And then I would venture to say, now this might not be the case for everybody, but if you can get your floor and the market value around the same amount, you're going to go into this negotiation and you're going to kill it, right? Because you are going to get a win-win for you and the company, and you already are, you don't have to do too much massaging. But if you realize that your floor is going to feel like their ceiling, then you got to come equipped. And this goes back to the results. You got to come equipped on why you are the person. You are uniquely qualified. You are uniquely custom fit to fill this position. And you in and of yourself, not just with your performance, but with your interpersonal relationships, with the way you handle people, with the way you serve others, with your character, with your integrity, your track record, how they can check your references, and everybody has good things to say about you, how you don't burn bridges, just all that good stuff. You have to put all of that in one good little situation and mix it up. And when you mix it up, you're pleading the case not for why they need to pay you more, but you're making the case for why you're the right fit. And because you're the right fit, and this is what you're looking for in terms of your position and what you're willing to offer to the position, and how you're willing to go above and beyond, and you put your heart and your soul into it, and you put that sweat equity in there, like the numbers sell themselves, especially if they're within range. And guess what? If they're not in range, they'll make you aware of that. And then you can make the adjustment. So you can either say, okay, well, what number were you looking to land at? And they can tell you, okay, well, this is where we were looking to land or to allocate as a salary for this particular position. If you're willing to take it, take it. If you're not, don't. And guess what? I know I can be, I'm an optimist at fault. I love to see the positive in situations. But let's just be very honest. There's always, and when I say always, there's always another door. I'm probably hitting this table and knocking, making sounds with this microphone. But let me just say this to you. There's always another door. Yes, you might have a disappointment. Yes, you might have your heart set on this opportunity and you are just like wanting it so bad and they want you even. But if the door doesn't open, there's always another door, right? So we talked about knowing your numbers, right? We talked about your record and how you gotta just sell the results that you have. Then you know what the market is bearing. You know your ceiling and you know your floor. I want to give you a bonus one now, right? Because sometimes in negotiations, you know how it is. When we have nervous energy, what do if there's silence? We talk and we try to fill space and we just try to get rid of the awkward energy. But I want you to do like this with me. I want you to sit back. I want you to breathe. I want you to take a moment and just pause. When you are in negotiation, feel free to let the silence do the talking for you. So if someone asks you a question in terms of money or details concerning where you're trying to come in terms of your compensation package, state your expectation, be very polite, very specific. And once you get to that point, guess what? State your case and wait for their reply. And if you don't hear anything in a few seconds, no one will die. Like, all you have to do is just give it just a quick moment, let it sit, let it simmer, let it settle, and let them reply. And I promise you that the moment you start talking to fill in negative energy or the negative space or the awkward pause, the moment that you start feeling it, I guarantee it's probably some level of a backpedal or something to counteract what you just said, to like massage it because you think that it's a little uncertain that what you said just went over well. So just be cool, calm, collected, and wait for them to reply. And you'll be good. I promise you. Listen, if you watch this video all the way to the end, that means you probably got some value out of it. So here's what I need you to do. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell notification if you want to know anytime we post new videos, right? So I'm Mark Patterson here for Convo Room. Thank you so much for visiting. Make sure you make a little time to have some conversations with mentors, moguls, and legends. We'll see you later.